A whole watermelon sitting on a folding table is legal to sell in every state in the country. Nobody needs a permit, a license, or a commercial kitchen. Slice that same watermelon in half and hand a piece to the person standing in front of you. And in some cities, you can be cited, fined, or loaded into the back of a police car. It's the same fruit, the same table, and the same customer. The only thing that changed was a single cut with a knife. And that one cut moves it into a legal category almost nobody has ever heard of. So how does a piece of fruit end up in the same legal box as raw chicken? To answer that, we have to look at a quiet line that runs through American food law. It's the line that separates food. The government barely watches from food, it watches very closely. On one side of that line sits whole uncut produce. Picture a crate of apples, a pile of oranges, and a table stacked with melons at a farmer's market stall. In state after state, this is about the freest food a person can sell. A farmer can load a truck, park at a roadside stand, and hand fruit to strangers all day long without a food permit, an inspection, or a commercial kitchen anywhere in the picture. Whole produce is treated as low risk, and the law mostly leaves it alone. This same logic shows up in what are called cottage food laws. Across much of the country, a person can bake bread, jar jam dry herbs, or make candy in their own home kitchen and sell it straight to the public with little more than a label. The reason these foods earn a pass is that they're shelf-stable and hostile to bacteria. Sugar, acid, and dryness all work against the microbes that make people sick. Cut fruit fails every part of that test, which is why it almost never qualifies for the same easy exemption, no matter how homemade it happens to be. On the other side of that line sits a category with a clumsy government name. Regulators call it time and temperature control for safety food. For years, it carried an even blunter label, potentially hazardous food. This is the tier built for the riskiest things in a kitchen. Raw meat lives here. Raw fish, dairy, cooked rice, and soft cheese all live here too. These are the foods that grow dangerous bacteria if they sit too warm for too long, so the law wraps them in rules about refrigeration, temperature logs, permits, and inspections. This is the part that catches people off guard. The moment you slice certain fruits, they cross from the first category into the second. Cut melon is the textbook example, and it's written directly into the federal food code alongside cut leafy greens and cut tomatoes. A whole cantaloupe on a table counts as low-risk produce. A tray of cut cantaloupe gets legally grouped with raw poultry. Think about that for a second. The fruit didn't change, the sugar didn't change, and the vitamins didn't change. What changed is that a knife opened it up. There's a real reason behind it, even if the result sounds absurd. A melon's rind works like armor. That thick outer skin keeps bacteria out, and the intact fruit stays stable enough to sit at room temperature without much trouble. Once you cut through the rind, you expose the soft inner flesh, and that flesh is moist, low in acid, and packed with the exact nutrients bacteria love. Food scientists have shown that when a melon is cut or bruised, contamination on the surface can get pulled straight into the fruit, riding in through the stem end and any damaged spots on the rind. So from a pure safety standpoint, cut fruit really does behave more like a perishable than like produce. Acidity is a big part of the story. A whole tomato is acidic enough to hold bacteria at bay, which is why regulators leave it alone, yet a cut tomato is named in the same hazardous tier as cut melon. The rule even runs opposite to what you might expect. For a lot of cut produce, the law assumes it's hazardous first and demands laboratory testing to prove it's safe, rather than the other way around. The burden of proof sits on the fruit. And the danger here is more than theoretical. In 2011, one of the deadliest foodborne outbreaks in modern American history traced back to cantaloupe. Contaminated melons from a single farm sickened around 147 people across 28 states, and more than 30 of them died. Melons became a cautionary tale precisely because their rough rind can harbor bacteria and the fruit is almost always eaten raw. So when regulators treat cut melon as hazardous, they're pointing at a real body count. Here's the ironic part. The very quality that makes fresh cut fruit so appealing, that soft, juicy openness, is the exact quality that pushes it into the dangerous foods tier. If cutting fruit only changed the science, this would stay a piece of trivia. What the law does with that science turns it into something people can get arrested over. Once a food lands in that time and temperature control category, the rules that follow get heavy. To sell it legally, a vendor generally needs the food held out of the danger zone, which regulators define as the range between 41 and 135 degrees Fahrenheit. They need refrigeration. They often need a permitted commercial kitchen just to do the cutting in the first place. And if they're working from a cart, the requirements pile up fast. Picture the classic fruit cart you've seen on a city sidewalk. It has a bright umbrella and a colorful spread of mango, melon, pineapple, and cucumber, with chili and lime on top. To run that cart inside the health code, the operator is often told they need hot running water, a waste tank, and a 3-compartment sink built into the cart itself, 1 basin for washing hands, and 2 more for cleaning tools. They need refrigeration for anything perishable. In some places, the cut fruit can't even sit on ice. And officials themselves have openly admitted that turning a normal cart into a compliant one is close to impossible. If you're wondering how a mango cart is supposed to fit a full 3-basin sink and a refrigerator under one umbrella, so is basically everyone else. There's one more wrinkle that makes cut fruit especially sensitive in the eyes of the law. It counts as ready to eat. Nobody takes a slice of melon home to cook it, so there's no final step to kill off bacteria before it reaches someone's mouth. Raw chicken at least gets cooked. Cut fruit travels straight from the cutting board to the customer, which means any contamination that gets in tends to stay in. That single fact, ready to eat with no kill step, is a huge reason the rules treat it so seriously. So you end up with a strange trap. The vendor is selling one of the healthiest foods on the street. The barrier to doing it legally comes down almost entirely to one detail: the fact that a knife was involved. Whole fruit would sail right through. Cut fruit demands a setup that a sidewalk cart usually can't provide. That one choice, to slice instead of sell whole, can look minor at first glance. Its legal weight is anything but minor. If this is the kind of legal detail you find yourself thinking about long after the video ends, take a second to subscribe, because breaking down the strange machinery behind everyday laws is what this channel does every week. So we've seen why cutting fruit reclassifies it. What that reclassification does to the people selling it on the ground is where the story gets heavier. For a long stretch, unpermitted street vending in some American cities was treated as a genuine crime rather than a paperwork issue. In one major city, records show that in a single year, more than 1,100 people were arrested in connection with illegal sidewalk sales. Many of them were ordinary people selling food, fruit among it, without the permits the health code demanded. For the vendors themselves, the daily reality became a kind of low-grade cat and mouse. In some neighborhoods, sellers keep watch for approaching inspectors and pass warnings down the block so a cart can be packed up before officers arrive. A single visit can mean losing an entire day's stock to confiscation, which for someone running on thin margins is the difference between a good week and a lost one. Part of what traps these vendors is that the permits themselves can be nearly impossible to get. In one of the largest cities in the country, the number of mobile food vending permits has been capped at a little over 5,000, a ceiling frozen in place since the early 1980s, with a waiting list thousands of names long. So a vendor can genuinely want to follow the rules and still find the door bolted shut. There simply aren't enough permits to go around. Pay attention to what happened next because it shows how far this can go. At a busy transit hub in a major American city just a few years ago, a woman selling cut fruit from a cart was surrounded by officers, had her goods confiscated, and was placed under arrest, all captured on video that spread widely afterward. Her produce would have been perfectly legal whole. The trigger was that she had cut it and sold it without a mobile food permit. You'd think someone would have designed a simpler path for a person selling fruit. For years, in many places, nobody did. But this is where the map gets uneven, and it matters because the rules change from place to place. This isn't a single national law, it's a patchwork that shifts from state to state and city to city. And one of the largest states in the country decided the arrest approach had gone too far. In 2018, California passed a law that decriminalized sidewalk vending across the state. Under that law, the harshest penalty for selling without a permit became an administrative citation rather than an arrest. Legal aid groups there now tell vendors plainly that they can't be criminally punished or arrested simply for street vending without a health permit. So in that state, the handcuffs came off, at least for the act of vending itself. There's a catch that vendors discovered quickly, though. Taking arrest off the table left one thing completely untouched. Cut fruit was still illegal to sell from a cart without the right facilities. The same health code that demands the sink and the refrigeration stayed exactly where it was. So instead of being arrested, a fruit vendor could now be cited, fined, and have an entire day's fruit confiscated on the spot. Those citations aren't trivial either, often landing somewhere between $250 and $1,000, though low-income sellers can sometimes get them reduced. The numbers make the gap plain. In that same region, an estimated 10,000 street vendors work the sidewalks, yet only around 90 of them hold both the city and county permits needed to operate fully in the clear. Legalizing the act of vending turned out to be the easy part. Meeting a health code written around brick-and-mortar kitchens from an umbrella cart on a sidewalk stayed just as far out of reach as before. The criminal penalty softened, while the underlying reclassification stayed firmly in place. And that's what makes the whole versus cut line so revealing once you notice it. A vendor who wants to stay clearly on the safe side of the law can sell whole fruit and walk right past most of these requirements. Whole apples, whole oranges, bananas, and whole melons all stay in the low-risk lane. The instant that same vendor pulls out a knife to give customers what they actually want, ready-to-eat slices, they step into the tier built for raw meat and dairy. It creates the odd situation where the law effectively nudges a fruit seller toward the less convenient, less appealing product, purely because the convenient version carries a bacterial risk on paper. Zoom out far enough and the pattern reaches well beyond fruit carts. Cut leafy greens, cut tomatoes, and chopped melon in a grocery deli case all fall under the same umbrella, which is why the salad bar and the packaged fruit cup in a supermarket are backed by refrigeration units, temperature checks, and licensed facilities you never think about. Cut melons and cut leafy greens now sit on a federal list of foods flagged for extra tracing, right next to soft cheeses and smoked fish. A big grocery chain can absorb all of that overhead without blinking. The person with a cart and a cutting board usually can't. So the same rule that keeps a supermarket fruit cup safe is the rule that can push a street vendor out of business, or in some places, into handcuffs. The next time you pass a cart stacked with fresh-cut mango and lime, remember that the law's real concern is the knife rather than the fruit. One clean cut moves a simple snack into the most tightly regulated tier of food there is. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to continue watching more of my videos on legal nuances, you can click the video on the screen now.